The Baron sent his bride to the river shack. The outlaw said, "Even water won't wash shame." They dragged her to the river before dawn, her wedding dress heavy with mud, her veil torn like the ghost of something holy that didn't survive the night. The Baron's men said nothing as they marched her down the bluff. The silence itself was his message. Everyone in the valley knew what it meant when a bride was sent to the river shack. It was where the Baron hid things that embarrassed him. Debts, secrets, wives who spoke when they shouldn't. Her name was Elsie Ward, though she doubted he remembered it now. He had married her in a chapel of mirrors 3 days ago, then locked her away for whispering what she'd seen behind those mirrors, the girls he'd traded, the papers he'd burned, the truth that could strip his name clean of its gold. "He says you'll stay till you learn what loyalty means," one guard muttered, pushing her toward the crooked door. "And if I don't?" she asked, her voice thin but steady. "Then the river'll teach you." They left her there, bound by shame and cold, the fog crawling in through the cracks, the water whispering at the stilts below. The shack smelled of rot and whiskey and old promises. She sat on the floor, hugging her knees, trying not to breathe too loud. Hours passed. The light thinned. And then came the sound of boots. Slow, careful, unhurried. A shadow filled the doorway, tall and lean, wearing a black coat gone gray at the edges. The man's hair was long, his face half hidden beneath the brim of a hat, his eyes a storm that had learned patience. He studied her like someone measuring what the world had already taken. "You the Baron's bride?" he asked. She didn't answer. "Didn't think so," he said. "He don't marry people, he buys 'em." He stepped inside, dropped a sack of coal near the stove, and struck a match. The glow caught on his cheekbones, on the faint scar that told a story older than violence. "Name's Colt Avery," he said. "They call me Outlaw 'cause I stopped pretending men like him were law." She stared, heart pounding. "You shouldn't be here." "Neither should you." His tone was calm, unblinking. "He sent you to wash the dirt off his name. But water don't wash shame. It just moves it downstream till it finds someone with the guts to drag it back." He crouched beside her, flame flickering between them, and for the first time that day she didn't shiver from the cold. By the time morning came, the fog had thinned, but the shame still clung to the river like breath on glass. Elsie woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of boots pacing the shack floor. Colt Avery was there still. Coat off, sleeves rolled, eyes fixed on the fire as if it owed him an answer. "You stayed," she said quietly. "Couldn't sleep," he replied. "River talks too much?" She sat up, wrapping her torn shawl tight. "You think helping me makes you different from him?" "No," he said, "just less afraid of dirty hands." The room was dim except for the glow from the stove. Outside, the water slapped the stilts, steady and slow, like a warning counting down. "He'll send men," she whispered. "He already did," Colt said, glancing at the window. "They're watching from the ridge. Probably waiting for me to leave so they can finish what he started." She felt her stomach twist. "Then why don't you run?" He looked at her for a long time. "Because I don't like cowards, especially the ones I used to be." She didn't understand until he added, "I was the Baron's man once." The words hit harder than the cold. "You worked for him?" "Guarded his trains, his money, his lies, till he framed me for killing a man I never met." He poured coffee into a tin cup, handed it to her. "The Baron don't punish mistakes, he buries 'em." She sipped it, the taste bitter and real. "So why save me?" He smiled without warmth. "Maybe I'm trying to see if I still can." A sound broke outside, branches snapping, hooves in the mud. Colt stood fast, pulling the revolver from his belt, every motion quiet, deliberate. He found you faster than I hoped. Elsie froze. You can't fight all of them. Don't need to, he said. Just need to make him look at what he's done. He stepped to the door, cracked it open. Through the fog she could see shapes, 3 riders, their silhouettes ghost-like against the river light. One called out, "Baron says to finish the job." Colt stepped outside, gun low, voice calm. "Then tell the Baron I'm still breathing." The riders hesitated, one shifting in the saddle. "You gonna die for her?" Colt smiled, slow and certain. "I already did once. Didn't take." The river carried the echo away, but inside the shack, Elsie realized what she felt wasn't fear anymore. It was the first flicker of something dangerous. Hope. The gunfire never came. The riders stared through the fog, uneasy at how calm the outlaw looked standing alone in front of the shack. One of them, young, nervous, spurred his horse a step forward, but stopped when Colt didn't flinch. "You gonna make this hard?" the man called. "Hard's already here," Colt said. He lowered his gun, not in surrender, but in challenge. "You tell the Baron if he wants his bride's silence, he can come earn it himself." The rider hesitated. "You talk like you ain't scared to die." Colt smiled. "I did my dying when I worked for him." Then something shifted in the fog. The sound of a second horse behind them, the click of a hammer pulled back. A voice cut through the mist. Hoarse, older, broken. "Don't shoot," it said. The young man's eyes widened. "Grady? Ain't no one worth dying for a baron's pride," the older rider said, edging his horse forward until the light from the shack touched his face. Deep lines, one blind eye, a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to lie. "Tell him yourself," the young one snapped. Grady spat into the mud. "I already did once. That's why he sent me to hang. I cut the rope before I choked." The other 2 men froze. Colt's gun stayed lowered. "What's he hiding, Grady?" The old man's gaze moved to Elsie in the doorway, her white dress now gray from the damp. "He's hiding the girls he sold," he said. "The brides that didn't come back." Elsie's breath caught. "There were others?" "Dozens," Grady said. "He calls it justice. I call it business." Colt turned to the riders. "You still working for that kind of man?" They didn't answer. "Then ride," he said quietly, "and remember what it feels like to be given a choice." The youngest turned his horse without a word. The others followed. When the sound of hooves faded, Colt holstered his gun and leaned against the post, exhaustion in every breath. "They'll be back," Elsie whispered. "Maybe," he said. "But next time they'll know the truth walks beside me." She stepped closer, her voice barely more than a breath. "You just made yourself their target." "Nah," Colt said, meeting her eyes. "I just reminded them what kind of man still exists." The river rolled on, louder now, as if carrying word of rebellion downstream toward a town that had been quiet for too long. By dusk, the river turned red with the reflection of the sky, and the valley went quiet in that strange way it does before something violent happens. Colt stood outside the shack, watching the current drag fallen branches past like warnings. Behind him, Elsie packed what little they had into a sack: flour, matches, a half-broken compass. "You still got time to run," he said. "You said running don't fix what's wrong," she answered. "I'm done hiding." Before he could speak again, the sound came. Hooves, slow and measured, too heavy for hired men. When the first rider appeared on the ridge, the light caught the silver on his coat buttons. The Baron rode down the slope like he owned the land, like the river itself was just another piece of him. 4 gunmen followed, each one staring ahead with that hollow obedience of men who'd stopped asking questions. "Outlaw," the Baron called. "You've been busy." Colt didn't move. Just cleaning what you left to rot." The Baron dismounted, his boots sinking in the mud, his smile polite and poisonous. "You think hiding a disobedient wife makes you righteous?" "No," Colt said, "but it makes me free." The Baron laughed softly, shaking his head. "Freedom's a story poor men tell themselves before they hang." He stepped closer, gloved hand brushing the gun on his belt. "Give her back, and maybe I let you walk." Elsie stepped into the doorway before Colt could stop her. "You don't own me," she said. The Baron's smile faltered. "You bear my name, girl. That's ownership enough." Colt moved between them, his voice steady. "You bought silence, not a soul." The Baron sneered. "You're preaching to a man who sells sermons." He looked past Colt, his gaze sharp as a blade. "You forget I made this town. I built the bank, the tracks, the law. One word from me, and every man from here to Kansas will hunt you both." Colt tilted his head, eyes narrowing. "Then speak it. But make sure they know what they're chasing. A man who tells the truth, and a woman who survived yours." The Baron's jaw tightened. "You won't live to tell it." "Maybe not," Colt said, cocking his revolver. "But you'll die knowing someone finally said it out loud." For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then thunder rolled far upriver, echoing down the valley like applause from something older than law. The Baron hesitated, staring at Colt, and in that flicker of doubt. The first crack appeared in the empire he'd built out of silence. By midnight, the storm came down from the hills, black and heavy, turning the river into a living thing that clawed at the banks and swallowed every lie in its path. The wind shook the shack till its walls moaned. Colt barred the door while Elsie fed the fire, its glow trembling over the barrels and broken furniture. The Baron's men had camped upriver, but thunder cracked again, and Colt knew none of them would make it far. When he looked outside through a crack in the boards, water was already licking at the lowest steps. "It's rising," Elsie said. "It'll take the whole shack before morning." "Then it'll have company," Colt muttered. But before he could speak again, a fist pounded on the door. "Open up!" It was the Baron, soaked to the bone, hat gone, eyes wide with disbelief that the river dared to climb higher than his name. Colt pulled the door open, shoved him inside, and barred it again. The Baron stumbled forward, gasping. "You think I'll die in the mud with the likes of you?" "You might die honest for once," Colt said. "Best ending you could hope for." Elsie turned away, her voice shaking. "Let him stay. The river don't care who's right." The Baron sneered at her, but the sound of the wind cut his words short. "You were supposed to make me respectable," he said. "Instead, you made me a fool." "No," she said. "You did that yourself." The water slammed against the stilts, spraying through the cracks. Colt tossed him a blanket, motioning toward the corner. "Sit down before you fall down." For the first time, the Baron obeyed. The shack groaned under the pressure, the walls dripping, the floor cold and trembling. "You could have had everything," he said to Elsie, voice low, tired. "Money, a name." "And you could have had a soul," she answered. Colt looked at him, eyes steady. "Tell her what you did, Baron. Tell her why you sent her here." The man's shoulders sagged. "I sent you because you saw too much," he said finally. "You knew about the trains, the girls, the papers." He looked down at his hands. "I built an empire out of secrets. I thought if no one spoke them, they weren't sins." Outside, a section of wall tore away, rain exploding through the gap. Colt grabbed a beam, holding it fast. "Secrets drown the same as men," he said, "and tonight this river's taking both." Lightning flared across the water, showing all three faces, one guilty, one defiant, one finally free. The first crack came like a gunshot. Then the whole shack lurched sideways, one wall tearing clean away into the black rush outside. Water burst through the floorboards, sweeping chairs and firewood into chaos. Colt grabbed Elsie by the waist, dragging her toward the ladder to the loft. "Climb!" he shouted over the roar. She scrambled up, soaked and shaking, while below them the Baron stumbled, clutching the table as the river came for him. "Help me!" he yelled, but the plea was half drowned in the thunder. Colt hesitated, eyes narrowing through the flicker of lightning. He could have let it happen. God knew the world might be better for it. But something inside him, something older than anger, moved faster than hate. He shoved his revolver into his belt, waded through the freezing water, and caught the Baron's arm. "On your feet!" he growled. The current slammed against them, pulling hard, the stench of mud and decay rising around them. "You think saving me fixes what I've done?" the Baron gasped. "No," Colt said. "It just keeps you alive long enough to answer for it." He dragged him toward the ladder, shoving him upward with the strength of a man who'd carried too many ghosts. Elsie reached down, gripping Colt's wrist, her fingers white against the dark. "You first!" she cried. "Not this time," he said, pushing the Baron up instead. The old man disappeared into the loft, coughing, spitting river water. Colt looked up at her. "Go." "Not without you," she said, voice breaking. "Then we both stay," he replied. And in that heartbeat, something shifted. The current, the air, the will of whatever had been watching all along. The beam above them snapped. Colt hauled himself up beside her as the floor gave way, the river swallowing the lower half of the shack in one violent gulp. They clung to the rafters, rain hammering through the open roof. The Baron stared down at the swirling black water where his empire had vanished. "Everything's gone," he muttered. Colt nodded, breath ragged. "Good. Maybe it'll finally make room for something honest." Lightning flashed again, revealing what was left. The shack breaking loose from its posts, drifting with the current like a coffin set free. "If it floats," Colt said, "we've got a chance." The Baron looked at him, then at Elsie. "Why save me?" Colt met his eyes, calm and fierce. "Because somebody has to prove mercy still lives in this country." The shack groaned, lifted, and began to move downstream, 3 souls riding the wreckage of everything they'd been. The current dragged them downriver for hours, spinning the remains of the shack through debris and lightning. By dawn, the storm had thinned to mist, but the current was faster now, furious from the night's rain. The air smelled of wet wood and rust. Ahead, the broken frame of an old railway bridge jutted from the fog, half collapsed, half waiting to finish the job. Colt saw it first. "Hold on," he said, voice raw. The Baron and Elsie clung to the beams as the shack tilted toward the pilings. "We'll crash!" she cried. "Not if I steer us through," Colt said, already moving along the splintered floor, grabbing an oar that had washed in from nowhere, maybe a gift from the river itself. The current pulled them closer, the sound of the water roaring under the bridge like breath through a throat that refused to die. The Baron's hands slipped. Colt caught him again. "Don't let go!" "Why?" the Baron shouted. "You should have shot me when you had the chance." "Because you need to live with what you did," Colt said. The words hit harder than the wind. The shack slammed against a support beam. Elsie screamed as the side broke open. Cold water surged over their legs. The Baron lost his footing, the current dragging him halfway out. "Help!" Colt lunged, grabbing his collar. "Kick!" the Baron gasped, choking. "Why do you keep saving me?" Colt pulled him back with a strength born from something more stubborn than forgiveness. "Because hate ain't what makes men different from monsters." Another crash. The shack splintered, spun sideways, and shot under the bridge. For a moment everything went white with spray, then quiet, unnatural, heavy. They floated in still water beyond the wreck. Only half the roof remained. Elsie clung to Colt's shoulder, breathing hard. "You could have let him drown," she whispered. "I know," he said, "but then the river would have kept him clean." The Baron coughed, staring at his hands as if seeing them for the first time. "You saved a man who destroyed you both," he said. "No," Colt replied. "I just gave you a chance to decide what you'll be when the river forgets." The sun broke through, pale and low, lighting the valley like a truth the world could finally see. The wreck drifted slow toward a sandbank where reeds swayed in the morning light. Elsie exhaled. "We made it." Colt looked downriver, eyes hard. "Not yet. Surviving's easy. Living with it's the hard part." And behind them, the bridge groaned once more, then fell, its last echo swallowed by the current that had carried their sins away. By noon, the wreckage had drifted into calmer water, wedging against a sandbank near the outskirts of a river town called Grayson's Bend, a place built on trade, rumor, and fear of the Baron's name. Smoke rose from chimneys, the bell of the river dock clanged somewhere beyond the fog, and gulls circled above like restless ghosts. Colt jumped into the shallows first, pulling the remains of the shack toward land. Elsie followed, drenched and shivering but alive. The Baron stumbled last, coughing, his fine coat shredded, his ring hand shaking as if the river still clung to him. "We need help," Elsie said, her voice thin. "We need truth," Colt answered. He scanned the riverfront, the tavern, the blacksmith's yard, the warehouse lined with workers unloading cargo. "These people serve him," the Baron hissed. "They'll kill us before they listen." Colt stared hard. "Then we make them listen." He marched up the bank, dragging one of the barrels that had floated with them, slamming it upright in the middle of the muddy street like a pulpit. "You all know the Baron," he shouted. "You've filled his ships, buried his lies, bowed when he rode through town." Faces appeared in doorways, dockhands, wives, even the preacher who blessed the Baron's deals. "Look at him now." Colt stepped aside so they could see the man who'd ruled them, soaked, trembling, stripped of everything but guilt. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The preacher frowned. "What is this?" "The reckoning," Colt said. "He sent women to the river, buried what he couldn't control. He pointed to Elsie, was one of them." Gasps, curses, disbelief. The Baron's voice cracked. "Lies. All of it!" "Then tell them what's under your house," Colt barked. The crowd went still. "Tell them about the cellar behind the wine racks, where the girls waited for trains that never came." The color drained from the Baron's face. Someone shouted, "Is it true?" Another, "We've heard stories." The Baron's shoulders slumped. "I gave this town wealth," he said weakly. "And took its soul," Colt replied. "Now take back what's yours." He stepped away, letting silence fill the space where power used to stand. Elsie's gaze held steady on the man who'd called her shame. "You thought water would wash you clean," she said, "but now the whole town's your river." The crowd began to move, slow, deliberate, surrounding the Baron not with weapons but with their eyes, the kind that stripped a man bare. And for the first time in his life, he bowed, not out of pride, but because the weight of truth finally pushed him down. The crowd stood in the muddy street long after the shouting stopped. No guns were raised, no one dragged the Baron away. It was quieter than any hanging Jonah, years ago, had ever seen. People just looked at him, faces he'd ruled through fear now watching him like a mirror they no longer needed to bow to. The preacher stepped forward first, voice shaking but clear. "You built this town with gold that bled," he said. "Let the river have what it's owed." Someone untied the Baron's horse from the post and brought it forward. "Ride," a dockhand said. "Don't come back." The Baron didn't argue. He looked at Colt, at Elsie, then at the water that had followed him all the way here. "You'll never wash it clean," Colt said quietly. "But you can stop making it dirty." The Baron nodded, face pale, hands trembling. When he mounted, no one saluted. No one spoke. He rode slowly toward the riverbank, where the current glimmered under the noon light. For a long time they watched him fade into the fog, a man who had mistaken fear for power and found both washed away. When he was gone, the preacher turned to Colt. "You'll answer for your own crimes someday," he said. "I know," Colt replied, "but not before I fix what he broke." He looked to the people gathered, the same men who once hunted him. "You've got his ledgers, his trains, his docks. Use them right. The river don't need kings, it needs hands." One by one they nodded. A woman pressed bread into Elsie's hands. "For the road," she said. "Where will you go now?" "Home," Elsie whispered, though she didn't know where that was yet. Colt heard her, smiled faintly. "Home's anywhere you stop running." The crowd began to scatter. Quiet. Purposeful. The preacher bent to the mud, scooping a handful of river water, letting it slip through his fingers like he was baptizing the whole town. "Let this be enough," he said. Colt turned to Elsie. "You ready?" She looked back once at the dock, the faces, the fading echo of power undone. "Yes," she said. "Let's leave what's clean behind." As they walked toward the waiting boat, the wind shifted, carrying the smell of the river and rain. The people of Grayson's Bend returned to their lives, lighter somehow, as if forgiveness had weight, and someone had finally carried it for them. Colt didn't look back. Some things were meant to stay washed away. By dawn the next morning, the mist lifted from the valley, revealing a river calm enough to trust again. Colt stood at the stern of a flatboat, guiding it upstream with slow, steady strokes. Beside him, Elsie sat wrapped in a wool blanket, the sunrise painting her face in soft gold. The town of Grayson's Bend was already behind them, shrinking into the distance like a memory finally ready to rest. "You think he made it?" she asked quietly. "The Baron?" Colt didn't look back. "Men like him don't drown easy. They just get smaller till no one sees them anymore." She nodded, watching the water fold and glitter. "You could stay," she said. "They'd have you lead the town." "I'm no leader," he replied. "I'm a man who stops when he should have walked past. That's enough." For a while they didn't speak. The oars dipped and rose, dipping and rising, keeping the rhythm of something steadier than survival. The riverbank drifted by, trees just beginning to bud, the world turning green again. "What happens when we reach the next town?" she asked. "You start fresh," he said. "New name if you want one." "And you?" He smiled faintly. "I'll find another river, another story to mend." She looked at him, realizing for the first time that mercy could be a kind of loneliness, too. "You saved me," she whispered. "You saved yourself," he said. "I just showed you the water." They passed a bend where the current slowed, the sky mirrored in perfect stillness. Elsie reached over, touching his arm lightly. "You ever wonder if the river forgets?" "No," Colt said. "It remembers everything. It just keeps moving." The breeze picked up, carrying the smell of cedar and sun-warmed earth. A heron rose from the shallows, its wings flashing white before it vanished into the morning light. Colt watched it go. "That's what starting over looks like," he murmured. She leaned against him, not out of need, but peace. Ahead, the water widened toward open country, where no one knew their names and no one needed to. The boat drifted slow, the sound of the oars soft as breathing, the river calm as forgiveness. When the sun climbed high enough to turn the surface to fire, Colt rested the oar, letting the current take them where it wanted. The baron's sins, the town's silence, the blood and the shame, they all sank behind them like stones too heavy to carry. The world felt new, not pure, not perfect, just clean enough to try again. If this story left a weight in your chest and a warmth right after, let it stay there. These tales remind us that mercy isn't weakness. It's what keeps the world from freezing over. If you felt that truth tonight, share it. Leave a thought below and tell someone who's forgotten that forgiveness still rides these rivers. Until the next one, keep your fire lit and your heart kind.